Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Federal agencies doubled their number of AI use cases over the past year. That's according to the latest inventory maintained by the Office of Management and Budget. There are now more than 3,600 use cases documented across the government. Greg Barbaccia is the Federal Chief Information Officer and Chief AI Officer. In a conversation with Jason Miller, Barbaccia gave us an update on Federal News Network's 2026 AI and Data Exchange.
It's exciting. It's up 70% from the previous year, and agencies are really embracing responsible experimentation. With how fast the technology is moving, I thought people would be moving a lot quicker and maybe a little more recklessly, but people are being very responsible, so we're happy to see that.
I noticed that as you go through it, there's all the different types of use cases, right? Some are in production, some are in pre-production, some are retired even. Did anything from a trend perspective, beyond the fact is responsible experimentation, the numbers stand out to you as you kind of started to look through those use cases?
Sure. So kind of unsurprisingly, the scientific use cases are at the top. So DOE, HHS, NASA's doing a lot of stuff. NASA's doing interesting things around AI solutions to analyze data coming back from the Mars rover. DOE is using it to accelerate new material development. So it was exciting to see all these scientific use cases.
At the same time, one of the things you all through the administration have been really focused on is effectiveness, efficiency, really to drive kind of the workflow. As we've seen over the last year or so, fewer federal employees, AI is really looked at to drive some of that improvements. Is that another area that you have said, oh, there's some really good examples that we can maybe expand across the government?
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to augment the federal workers and making their lives easier. It's very frustrating when you come into federal service and you don't necessarily have access to the tools you do in your private life. So trying to get automated away some of these mundane, repetitive tasks, people really enjoy that.
As you guys were going through the use cases, was there anything outside of the normal that you just were like, oh my goodness, like, again, I'll use the word surprise, but also kind of in that either pleasant or unpleasant surprise?
Yeah, a pleasant surprise was public comment analysis, something, I guess the layperson citizen isn't too familiar with, but when the government does a new regulation or another rule, we post it for public comment. And, sometimes we get tens of thousands of comments. When a human has to go through that, a lawyer's time is very valuable, and that just takes so much longer. So we're saving hundreds of thousands of staff hours with that. Lawyers can focus on understanding and responding to the public instead of having to figure out which arguments are exactly the same and parsing through all these things. So how impactful that type of use case is across all the rulemaking agencies is really nice to see.
We actually have, as part of the AI Day Exchange, an interview with Casey Mulligan, the Chief Counsel for Advocacy at SBA, who talks exactly about that use case, where they just got so much comments and regulatory reform look back and how AI has really helped them. Greg, plenty to talk about AI use cases. I'm going to shift over to another bit of news that you all put out just recently, OMB memo around CIO authorities. If you could just offer a little bit of comment on that issue, but also how it relates to how CIOs can use that authority to better oversee, manage the buying implementation of AI tools.
Sure. The marvelous mega memo, a long time in the works. I'm super proud to have gotten that out. We need to target shadow IT. So these agencies are so large, there's so many subcomponents. Oftentimes a shop like a CFO shop will do their own technical procurements. And when that's happening outside of the purview of the CIO, that's when duplicative technology comes. We're not negotiating the same. So kind of reinforcing FTARA, reinforcing some previous statutes as well, to allow the CIO to be what they're statutorily required to be, the ultimate technical authority at the agencies. And then what's interesting is now we're asking for reporting to my office. And now we could help support this whole of government effort we're trying to do, where I could see renewals from the big vendors across the entire government. And this helps with negotiations. When we were doing all this procurement consolidation early in the administration, one of the complications was privity of contract. The vendors would say, my contract isn't with OMB, it's not with the General Services Administration, so I can't share that pricing data. So now we're asking agencies to bake that allowance into solicitations, into contracts going forward. And now we can look at the span of technology across the entire federal enterprise, which makes our negotiation capability far stronger.
The reinforcement of CIO authorities, FTARA, as you said, very important. But it sounds to me like the most important piece here is baking that kind of contract clause in there to say, we can see across the government what you're paying at Interior versus Agriculture and compare those terms and conditions and compare that. Is that to you the biggest win here?
Absolutely. Look, executive orders and memos, these things don't self-effectuate, right? We need some sort of reporting requirements so we could analyze the data. And 2610, I'm very excited about because we are really going to operationalize this data and use it to drive decisions. Bureaucracy sucks. And when we just ask people to send these reports into the ether and we don't do anything with them, that's bad for morale. So the CIOs are really excited about how we're actually going to use this information.
And of course, the concern that I've heard is another report from OMB. Have you guys, I know it's still early, you guys still probably are working through some things and you haven't even gotten the first set of reports yet, but have you started to talk about how you're operationalize these reports? Because it could be a ton of data. And that's why I'm setting you up for a little AI discussion. You know that.
Yeah, of course. We're going to deploy AI against it, obviously. And what's important to note is that we only asked for 6 months of data for the initial call. We'll likely extend it, but instead of just doing this arbitrary, indefinite data exchange, what we're going to do is take that 6 months of data and understand how do we tweak it to make sure the burden is worth what we're doing with it. So just figuring out what it looks like now and then into the future, how do we change that to make it less burdensome?
And again, I think that's the key here. CIOs, okay, if I'm going to give data and collect data, I want to see that return. What comes from it? To your point, if it just goes on and on and on and on, there's probably a feeling there's not a lot of return. Shifting more broadly outside of the memo and maybe some of the budget areas, what is OMB's kind of view about looking at, when it comes to AI, the implementation side? Okay, you guys don't put your hands in it. You guys don't do the coding. But a lot of times agencies, when they're looking at AI and say, okay, how do we use it? Where do we find the right places? How are you starting to drive some of that sharing, some of that use case? Hey, you have a use case over here. There's a use case over here. Let's connect those dots.
Sure. So we have the Federal Chief AI Officers Council that I chair, and we're using it to, for the first time again, move forward whole of government. What's really exciting about AI is not only do we have an opportunity to deploy tech inside the government at the speed of the commercial sector, but we can do it all together. So we're convening a lot of subgroups within that organization to understand, all right, who's writing position descriptions using AI? What models are you using? What's the orchestration of the model? How are you interacting with it? And let's figure out in one room, what is the best implementation for the government? So we don't have people doing different procurements for the same use cases in different ways. And that also allows for a more efficient public employee because you could jump around from agency to agency, as civil servants often do, and be immediately relevant and not understand a completely different way of doing business. So in addition to that, we're also identifying all the pain points agencies see for AI procurement, IT security, privacy, what works with integration, what doesn't, and how to evaluate cost and kind of drive these negotiations through GSA together as one as well.
The CAI Council, you mentioned some subgroups. Are they some newer subgroups? Are you just reinvigorating some of them? And then how often are they meeting? Just give me a little bit more background, because I think that drives a lot of these changes you're talking about. Is, hey, do we meet monthly or weekly or however often?
Yeah, they meet monthly, and I'm happy to say they're self-organizing. So when we have the larger council meetings, we say, what are the topics du jour? And then people self-organize around getting together and doing group projects. An interesting one that came out was templates for adoption. So again, the chief AI officers who are interested get in the room, they come out with a template, and then we share it with all the other agencies. So we're not reinventing different things 24 times across the CFO Act agencies.
The big challenge I think OMB has had over the years is say, hey guys, here's a great template, use it, getting folks to use it. Is there another level down where you're sending in kind of experts? Again, maybe not OMB specifically, but hey, if the Commerce Department developed this template and they are the experts, do they go help, the Treasury Department or so on and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody wants a piece of the AI pie because it's the new shiny thing, right? So there's no shortage of people coming out of the woodwork, and we're running the council with no ego. So OMB is here to empower the agencies in this administration. So we're taking anybody who's interested to come in and talk and help us out for sure.
You also mentioned working on AI procurement. I know you have a close relationship with Kevin Rhodes, the OFPP administrator. Mm-hmm. You guys at OMB also put out some memos around responsible buying and smart buying of AI and procurement. Maybe talk a little bit about that relationship with OFPP, how you guys are kind of trying to march in lockstep to make that buying of AI more straightforward and, again, easier.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Rhodes and I work closely together. This is new technology. We can't think about it in the same paradigm we thought about cybersecurity or cloud service providers. This technology moves very quickly. You have to keep on top of it day to day in a lot of places. 90-day cycles, it's completely different than what we saw. And also how it interacts with data across our environments is really different. So we have to make some of the way we do procurement more living and not these kind of archaic policies that existed in the past. And it's an exciting time because we're doing a revolutionary FAR overhaul, and we're allowed to use that to focus on what makes sense for technology adoption, not just normal commodity solutions.
That's Greg Barbaccia, the federal CIO. Watch his full conversation with Jason Miller at federalnewsnetwork.com. Search AI and Data Exchange.